From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 577. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, we're never going to get sick of the virtual hardwood, but like the rest of our community, we do like to take a break to play other things every once in a while. With that in mind, please, well, there's no tip-off this week, I suppose, so please hit start on our episode.
So yeah, for today's show, we are going to be talking about non-basketball games we are playing and what mechanics from those games keeps us on the sticks. We also received many community responses to this topic, so we'll get to those during the mailbag segment. So Andrew, we spend the majority of our time on basketball video games, but since we got into gaming, we have made time for non-basketball titles, whether it be other sports games, adventure games, action games, RPGs, side scrollers, etc. So we figured we would dedicate a show to non-basketball games we recommend, with most of the conversation tailored around what we are playing right now. I think this is also helpful for those hoop gamers who may be looking for a non-basketball game to spend time on. It's possible they have either not heard of some of the titles that are going to be mentioned on this show, or they have but need a push to finally pick up the game. So I say we go through the titles one by one. What is your first title, Andrew?
Well, I'm actually replaying GTA 3, Grand Theft Auto 3 at the moment. Got the definitive edition for last Christmas, and it's better. They polished it. It was launched in a notoriously rough state. There was some really bad AI upscaled images, textures. They messed up some of the signs and therefore some of the sign gags in the background of the city there in Liberty City. But it is one of my all-time favorite games, one of my all-time favorite entries in the GTA series. That's kind of a controversial pick, I know, because a lot of people like San Andreas. Of course, GTA 5 has been re-released for a couple of generations now, but I still love GTA 3. I love that setting. I even go with the classic controls, Derek. I know there's modern controls in the game, although I do appreciate the fact that there is checkpoints now. If you do happen to fail a mission, thanks to sheer bad luck, you can restart from a checkpoint. That's a really good idea. Don't have to go and trigger the mission again. I've finished the game once before on PS2, so I'm playing through it again on PC. And I have very similar habits with other genres as I do to basketball gaming. I love going back to an all-time favorite, playing it again, seeing if I can play it a different way. Not a whole lot of differences in the way you can play GTA 3 compared to Fallout, which I'll get into a little bit later on. But yeah, I'm enjoying this enhanced version of the game, and it's really taking me back to playing it for the first time.
Yeah, and I love the enhanced versions of these classics that get released. Same with Devil May Cry. I picked up the enhanced editions of, the original, the Devil May Cry 2, 3, etc. And the graphics are smoother. Everything looks cleaner. Sometimes they've added a little content to the games and whatnot. And most of the titles that I'm going to go over, you can play them single player, but they absolutely can be played co-op, whether it be local or online, because the majority of the time when I'm playing non-basketball video games, Andrew, I'm playing with my brother, right? So if you love co-op, if you love online co-op, if you have somebody you can play with, or you want to jump in with a random and whatnot, you're going to love my list of games. The other piece of this, too, is many of the games that I'm going to mention, once again, are still great single player, especially the one that I'm going to mention off the top of the show. But I do want to ask you, how many hours would you say that you've spent on GTA 3, the enhanced version?
Well, I've just started playing it recently, so it's about 3 hours so far. And at the start of a playthrough of GTA 3, because I have attempted a few playthroughs before, got very close to the end on the original PC version, but there's a very late stage mission, Espresso to Go, which, if you play GTA 3, you'll know how annoying that can be. I'm stuck on that one, or very close to it, towards the end in my original PC playthrough. They've taken that version down, obviously replaced it with the definitive version, which often happens with games when they re-release them. I like to, at the start of a playthrough of GTA 3, go through, find the hidden packages so that I unlock all of the weapons at my safe house, kind of do all the side missions first, especially because, spoiler alert for an over 20-year-old game, in the first area, the Mafia will end up being hostile to you as you finish that part of the game. So coming back and trying to finish the side mission when the Mafia is after you in their territory is pretty tough. So I like to get all the side missions done first. The taxi missions, the vigilante missions, the firefighting missions, the ambulance missions, etc. I like to do that while the game is relatively fresh, while I don't have gangs after me, and I can just explore a bit more leisurely and not have to be dodging gunfire, quite frankly. But yeah, I like to take a long time at the start, do some of the early missions to get them out of the way, but sort of do all that preparation for later on in the game.
Are you a 100% completionist type of guy?
I like to aim for it, but I've never done it yet.
So I'll let our audience know I've never been able to get into the GTA games, but I understand that they have a giant audience, right? And I also understand that there's a lot of content there. And I can appreciate what those games bring to consumers as far as being able to get truly immersed in the action, right? And whatnot. So I'm going to get into my first game. So one of the games my brother and I are currently playing is Remnant 2. Which is the sequel to Remnant from the Ashes. The developer is Gunfire Games, publisher is Arc Games. It gets a very positive review rating on Steam out of over 40K reviews. And we've talked about this before, Andrew. That's a great sign, right? There's this thing out there where people are like, oh, well, people only want to say something when they have something bad to say, right? People are only going to leave reviews if they have something to complain about. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because the majority of the games that I'm going to mention on this episode get very positive or overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. And people are absolutely loving these games. They're praising them in the comments on social media. They're praising them in the Steam reviews, etc. So just food for thought there. When you see a game that has mixed reviews or, bad reviews, and the majority of them are bad, etc., that means something, right?
Yeah,
there's something wrong with that game, right? So basically, I'll give the quick Google overview of Remnant 2 so you can kind of get an idea of what type of game this is. It's a third-person shooter action role-playing video game developed by Gunfire Games, published by Gearbox Publishing. A sequel to Remnant from the Ashes, the game was released for PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox Series X and S on July 25th, 2023, and generally receives positive reviews. The game, Andrew, can be played 100% co-op, just like the original Remnant game. Amazing graphics and gameplay. The boss fights are epic. It has a wide range of different enemies that keeps the experience fresh. Multiple difficulty levels you can choose from to customize your experience. However, I do recommend playing the original Remnant before this one, as not only is it better optimized for PC, but in my opinion, it is still the better game. As far as how long it takes to beat, how they have the how long to beat this game website, and people put their thoughts on that. So Remnant 2 completionist is labeled at about 82 hours, so you can sink a lot of time into this game. But if you want to just play through the main story, it's 18 hours. My brother and I have already spent 44.5 hours on that game. But for the first Remnant, we basically got completionist on it. We're probably about 95% on that game, and 194.9 hours, Andrew. That is getting your money's worth. And the thing is on the original Remnant, completionist on the how long to beat site says 59 hours, but we really got the most out of that game. And do you know why it took 194 hours? Lots of deaths, Andrew. We love a competitive game, and playing co-op, the boss fights are so hard. You have to go in prepared. You have to prepare your items for those guys and your weapons and whatnot. I just highly recommend both of these games. They are so well made. And Remnant 2 and Remnant from the Ashes.
And the amount of playtime that a game offers, invites, is a big deal. It's a constant talking point in gaming, obviously. But to that point, you want it to be because you're hooked on the game, because there's so much content, and you're so passionate about the game, you want to keep playing it. There are a lot of games that definitely artificially pad out their depth, and that is not good. That is not good game design. So it's great to hear that this one is keeping you hooked, that you're spending all this time not because it's frustrating or just padding it out with nonsense, that it is actually enjoyable for countless hours. I'm not that familiar with the game, I must admit, but I quickly looked it up here, and I can see that you can select different character archetypes, different builds, if you will, different classes. When you play through it with your brothers, do you mix it up? Do you change classes at all when you start a new playthrough, for example? Or do you always stick with a particular role that suits you?
We actually usually stick with the same class and try to go completionist fully with those classes. And another thing I really like about the Remnant games is it's not bogged down by a heavy story. It's not bogged down by a boring story and bad acting and whatnot. It's literally just action for the majority of the game, and there's not all of these cutscenes and interruptions and all of that stuff. And if you like third person shooters, if you like a lot of action and you like a great variety of enemies and epic boss fights, I feel like you can't go wrong.
And I totally relate to playing the same way, and I'll get into it more when I talk about Fallout, but I do find myself drawn to a specific style in various games, and it's also reflected in my basketball gaming as well with my career, that I do find myself, as much as I want to change it up from time to time, falling back into habits that I know will work for me, and a style that I know will work for me.
Yeah, I think the thing is that everybody has their own taste. There are people out there that like heavy stories, right? There are people out there, I've talked about this before, that buy the NBA 2K games to mostly watch CPU versus CPU gameplay, right? Like, I could never do that. I could never spend the majority of my time doing that. I want my hands on the sticks. I want to be in the action.
Same.
But there's people out there that love that. And some of these games, I'm going to give an example. There's people that really like point and click strategy games, right? Like, you point to a spot and the guy runs there, right? And then it's turn-based battling and whatnot. So there's this long pause, as you do your strategy, and then you attack, and then there's a long pause, and then they attack, etc. And that game is not for me, but those games sometimes make millions of sales, Andrew. Right. So, similar to, those people that don't like those games, I'm not a fan of them, but my brother and I have our certain tastes. And a couple of them are things like co-op third-person shooters, co-op third-person RPGs or MMORPGs, co-op third-person action RPGs, first-person co-op games like Borderlands, right? Which is in its own right an RPG because of the depth and whatnot, but it's really just, a first-person action game as well. But in Borderlands is actually shows up later on my list. But yeah, you'll see a theme with a lot of the games that I mentioned. Before I throw it over to you, I'm going to mention one more, and I'm not going to go too much into it because people are super familiar with this game because it's relatively new. Helldivers 2. We have spent 54.3 hours on it on Steam. And again, the majority of the games that I mentioned, if not all, we're playing on PC, but they're also available, most of them, for consoles too. But Helldivers 2 is just wacky fun. And just give a quick description of that game. Helldivers 2 is a 2024 cooperative third-person shooter game developed by Arrowhead Game Studios and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 5 and Windows. The game is the direct sequel to Helldivers. And what's crazy is that Helldivers 2 is a completely different style of game than the original Helldivers. With Helldivers 2, they went with that third-person route. The original Helldivers is like that overhead view. I believe if you think like a game like Diablo and whatnot, and just the gameplay is just so different and so good for Helldivers 2. So yeah, we've spent close to 60 hours on that game, and the amount of laughs that we've had as it relates to trying to complete missions together, just the way deaths happen, the sound effects your guy makes when, he's in a struggling situation or he's trying to help his partner, all of that stuff. Just an epic game, great gameplay. Helldivers 2 is great.
No, that's what you want. And I'm not that familiar with that one either. As you know, listeners can no doubt tell, I do skew retro. Well, retro being a relative term when I'm talking about 7th generation games like Fallout 3, like Fallout New Vegas, going back to those classics. I think that was a very strong generation for gaming, which isn't to say that there aren't great games today. Obviously there are, and you just mentioned one that is very popular. Do have a couple of friends who do play it, and it is interesting when a series changes up, or a sequel changes up the gameplay like that, and there have been some very controversial examples of that. Fallout 3, indeed, is controversial among original Fallout fans, and they can be quite snobby about that. Just got to throw that out there. But you look at games like Super Mario Bros. 2, the one that we got in the West, Derek, as opposed to The Lost Levels, the original sequel that came out in Japan, or Zelda 2. Changing up the style of gameplay can be controversial, but when it works, very successful.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. I also want to point out that the majority of the games on my list are basically in no way, shape, or form pay to win, and sometimes they don't have any microtransactions at all. This one, you can kind of help yourself along with buying upgrades, but it's not necessary, and it's, you don't have to pay to win on Helldivers 2. So what's your next game, Andrew?
And that is important, of course, to not have those pay-to-win or pay-to-enjoy mechanics. Wish my career was a bit more like that, as it used to be. So, I will mention Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas in tandem here. Do like to pick them up from time to time. I started a new playthrough on Fallout 3, and like I said, I find myself falling back into old habits. Like, this time I'm going to have a different weapons build, or I'm going to play it this way, I'm going to do this the evil route, or whatever. And then I just fall back into the way I like to play the game, because I'm always seeking out that perfect playthrough, that one where I get all of the story missions right and all the outcomes the way I want, and just trying to find what I feel is the perfect playthrough of that game, where I get everything. Or those games, I should say, because I do it for both. But I did start a new playthrough of Fallout 3 where I'm not using fast travel. After I discover locations, I'm still walking between locations, not using the fast travel. And to be honest, that can be a bit tedious at times, and it's certainly challenging, because of course you avoid some of the dangers of the wasteland when you fast travel after you've discovered locations, and it also slows down a lot of quests, because some quests have a bit of back and forth between locations that are far away. But it's been really interesting so far to restrict myself that way, to have to traverse the wasteland each and every time. I became over-encumbered with loot on one of my trips out into the wasteland, and was walking really, really slow, as you can still move if you are over-encumbered over the carry weight, but very slowly. So I was just inching my way back to Megaton just to be able to sell off this loot. Didn't want to drop anything that I could actually make some caps off of. So that was interesting there, and you can't fast travel when you're over-encumbered either. So yeah, this has been a very challenging run for me. And I'm inspired by the YouTuber Many a True Nerd, John. He does some great videos where he's doing challenges like that, making really weird builds. He's got a couple of series where he's the worst wanderer or the worst courier, where he makes the worst build possible, even using the console on PC to lower the skills and the special attributes lower than they should be at the start, just to see if he can beat the game from this horrible starting point. That's a really cool idea, and it makes me miss being able to do that kind of stuff with my career, Derek, where you make a really weird player, or kind of like the worst player in NBA history, and try and play through a my career, which you can kind of do, but because of the build system and the connection to the online scene, it's really tough. And I think you lose that spirit of experimentation when it's all focused on the competitive scene and meta builds and so forth. But you do have that in Fallout. It is actually rewarding to start over and try to play a different way. So, yeah, that's been interesting.
Are you stating that you're watching build videos for Fallout, Andrew? No, I do want to ask you something. Do you routinely do that? For a game that you're either first getting into or you've been playing it for a while, do you go onto YouTube and plug in the game's title and look for videos on how other people are playing it, trying to get tips, hints, etc.? Or do you just try to figure everything out yourself and you don't want to see that stuff?
I'd say that 99.9% of the time I'm trying to figure it out myself. With my career for a couple of years there, when jump shot videos were getting big, I was looking up information about which jump shots had the best green release window and things like that, because I was still playing online, so I was kind of interested in the meta. But after a while, I just want to play the way I want to play and make that work. And to that point, so often have the same attitude with my career that I'll say, you know what, this time I'm going to play something different. I'm going to treat it like a new Fallout playthrough and set it up a different way, but just like a Fallout playthrough and not playing the same way. Oh, look at this. I'm a playmaking, three-point shooting point guard playing for the Chicago Bulls, same as before. Of course, my 2K14, my career, didn't have that choice, so I'm playing for the 76ers, but again, similar build. So, yeah, I find myself falling into old habits in both of these games where you can create that build, create that style of play, because it just works for me. But yeah, I am trying to change it up a little bit with Fallout 3 as far as not fast traveling, as far as using melee weapons a little bit more to save ammunition, especially since I'm spending more time in the wasteland, not fast traveling, spending more time in between merchants, so don't necessarily have the ammunition. So for weaker enemies, the mole rats, etc., using a melee weapon like a baseball bat just to save ammunition. So I'm kind of playing it differently, but as far as the build, the overall build of the skills and everything, still playing a very familiar style. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
Next, I would recommend the Monster Hunter series, specifically Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise. You can sink hundreds of hours into these games, either single player or co-op. And the beautiful thing about these games, Rise, World, and Monster Hunter Wilds, the newest installation for the series, is you can pretty much play the entire game co-op, especially in Wilds, where if you're on the main mission and you want to be able to fight a monster with somebody else, you can just join their game as long as you both are playing it at the same time and whatnot. So there's like an online invite option. You can send that invite. You're in the same link party, and then you can fight that main story boss. But to give you an idea of how many hours you can spend in this game, so Monster Hunter World, we're at 424 hours and counting. So again, talk about getting your money's worth. And we also talked about, reviews, right? People don't just go online to leave a bad review. So on Monster Hunter World on Steam, about 300,000 reviews have been left. Very positive, Andrew. So it has stayed at very positive for about 300K reviews. This game is developed by Capcom. There are 36 large monsters that you can fight either solo or co-op in Monster Hunter World, and 18 small monsters, so a total of 54. In the newest game, Monster Hunter Wilds, there's 29 large monsters at the moment. This game is so new that there hasn't been much added to it or DLC, etc. But then there's also 18 small monsters for a total of 47. But Andrew, these games are so fun, especially co-op, building your characters, deciding which weapons that you're going to use. Are you going to use something fast like dual blades, or are you going to use a heavy hammer? Are you going to use a ranged weapon? Are you going to use a sword and shield? Are you going to use a long sword? There are so many different ways that you can play this game, and it just makes it a load of fun. The graphics are elite, whether it be Monster Hunter World, which was a PS4 title, also obviously on PC, or you're playing Wilds, PlayStation 5, not as well optimized either on the console or on PC. But these games just bring endless fun, endless customization, epic battles, etc. I also want to point out that they made a lot of mistakes with Monster Hunter Wilds, and we talk about companies kind of going backwards. right? Sometimes when companies go backwards with a series, it's because they're trying to capture a wider audience. So they'll do things that actually harm the series that they think is going to actually help. For example, Monster Hunter Wilds is not even close to as hard as Monster Hunter World. You can sometimes beat large monsters in 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. Meanwhile, all the fights on Monster Hunter World are epic. So they made Monster Hunter Wilds too easy. And as a result, what's happening, Andrew? It's got mixed reviews on Steam, right? There's a lot of people complaining about it on social media. They're trying to get their voices heard because they don't like that fact. Another thing is it's called Monster Hunter. What does that tell you, Andrew? You're supposed to be hunting monsters.
You think
right?
so?
And part of yeah, you would assume. And part of that hunt is to, track a monster, right? You want to be able to find its scratch marks, find its footprints, all of that stuff. But in Monster Hunter Wilds, the newest game, they made it so you will be led directly to the monster if you jump on I think they're called secrets or whatnot. It's it's a mount. And you jump on it and it leads you directly to the monster. It takes out the whole hunting portion of the game. It's here's the monster, and now you're going to fight it. And there's other missteps as well. The optimization, even on PS5, because we also got it for PS5 and Series X, there's a lot of stuttering. It has trouble handling this game. It is poorly optimized for both the PC and for the consoles. Meanwhile, Monster Hunter World is buttery smooth. So what's happening is they took a lot of steps back with Monster Hunter Wilds. That's reflected in the reviews and the commentary around the game, all in the name of trying to actually capture a wider audience, right? So that's unfortunate.
Yeah, we do see that. We've seen that with the NBA 2K series, obviously, trying to implement this open world. And obviously, I love open world games. I just mentioned GTA and Fallout, which are open world games, but they are specifically open world games. The open world makes sense, whereas in NBA 2K, it's basically a glorified loading screen for my career. Running around the city or the neighborhood is... Well, it was kind of novel the first time, I'll have to admit, but I could see the writing on the wall. I could see where that was going to be. But it is trying to appeal to everybody. We look at some of the things they're doing with my career. You look at how they brought in Gravity Ball, how they've brought in kart racing, thanks to the Lego 2K series. So they're trying to expand beyond basketball, and it often leads to a lack of focus on the important stuff and dumbing down the game. And that's obviously what's happened there with Monster Hunter Wilds. And you mentioned the ease of finding the monsters. It reminds me of a criticism of Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas and also Fallout 4 as well, that when you have a quest active, you've got a marker on your compass that basically points you in the direction. Follow your compass to the next point, the next objective, and there's no real exploration. You have to kind of do that yourself. And I do enjoy those games, obviously, but that is a valid criticism for people who would prefer that have to really wander the wasteland and really search for things. Although, with the size and scope of the game compared to the original isometric games, you kind of need some kind of guide, I feel. But yeah, that is a controversial addition. One of the things that a lot of the original fans, the purists, the snobs at times, to be honest, Eric, don't like about the series. And I do see the argument. But I also see why those games appeal to you, because it goes back to the way you and your brothers like to play basketball games, right? Co-op. And you like to have the toughest challenge possible. You like to play on Hall of Fame wherever possible, wherever that is viable and fun in a game. Or Superstar or All-Star, on the really old games, but All-Star was the top difficulty level. You like to play on those difficulty levels to get the challenge, to be stimulated, to really have to fight the CPU, and to play co-op, obviously. So these habits really do run across all the games we play. And as I've said before, growing up essentially an only child, my older brother is 16 years older than me, didn't grow up in the same house, not for very long. Anyway, my cousin would come to visit in the holidays, but I do like to play a lot of solo games, a lot of single-player games as a result. So I think that's really reflected in both of our habits.
No, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, we put Remnant on nightmare difficulty, right? So yeah, we're trying to get a challenge, and that's part of the fun for us. I do want to point out real quick before we move on to our next games, Monster Hunter Wilds, we've put in 53.8 hours into it. I think the main story, once we got to the credits, was 22 hours. So we've spent the last 31 hours on Endgame, which are like tempered monsters. They're called. They're supposed to be the higher rank best monsters and whatnot, and we're still taking the majority of them out in like under 10 minutes or like 11 minutes, and it's not much of a challenge. So while the gameplay is unbelievable, the graphics are pretty damn good. That challenge isn't there. The hunter portion is missing, etc. So for those of you who are interested in these Monster Hunter games, if I piqued your interest at all, I recommend Monster Hunter World over Monster Hunter Wilds. I also recommend at this time Monster Hunter Rise over Monster Hunter Wilds. And Monster Hunter Rise was basically a mobile game that was ported to the PC, and it still looks absolutely beautiful. And it plays very similar to Monster Hunter World, and the fights are epic, and the fights are just super challenging overall. And that game actually did get released for the Switch, PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, GeForce Now, Microsoft Windows, Xbox Series X, and Series S. So if you're a console gamer, you can still pick that one up. But again, great monster fights, good graphics, even though it's a mobile port. You can play the whole thing online co-op, etc. We're playing it on Steam. But I'd recommend Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise second, then Wilds, and then potentially Stories 2 if you want more of a cartoon version of fighting in turn-based style, which that game is still very, very good. So, Andrew, what's your next game?
So this is kind of a weird one, and I don't want to mention the name because we're not doing sponsored content, and it might come across that way, but it's actually a free-to-play mobile game, which I never thought I would have said. Even just mobile gaming, I've traditionally not been big on. I like having controller in my hands or using the mouse and keyboard, having a bigger screen, whatever. But have actually got hooked on this free-to-play darts game on my phone. And I happen to be playing a different game, just a puzzle game, just to pass the time on my phone, and this came up as an ad. And as a lot of people know, ads, the interactive ads on mobile games often are misleading. They're not actually representative of the actual gameplay. So after playing this ad version a couple of times, this demo version, I thought, you know what, I'm going to check it out just to see if it actually is as good as the demo. And actually was. I was actually surprised. It's PvP, so you are playing people around the globe, playing darts. I'm not the biggest fan of darts in real life. Do like to play with friends. A couple of friends have got dartboards. Go around there for a few drinks and dinner, and we'll play darts sometimes. But yeah, I've been enjoying this game. And the funny thing about it, and I mentioned this in a recent article because I was talking about how NBA 2K has become very much a mobile game in some respects. With my team and my career, so many mobile game mechanics in a AAA release, that the grinding in this game and the multiple currencies and the daily rewards, etc., I've been prepared to do things like watch the ads, or I don't watch the ads, I just start the ads and then mute them and let them play out just to get rewards and so forth. But the kind of grinding and using different currencies and having the seasonal rewards, the fact that a AAA game has prepared me to tolerate and have a bit of fun with a mobile game is so backwards when you think about it. But yeah, I actually have been enjoying this game, and I do think it's important to have these little games that you can play in between bigger experiences. And it's just a time killer, maybe 10 to 20 minutes a day, just jumping on this game, playing some darts against people around the world. I hate the fact that this sounds like an ad, Derek, but which is why I'm not mentioning the name. But yeah, it's been fun to have that just to play in between my other sessions.
Do you remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, and even mid 2000s, how big the games were that, that you talk about time killers, but how like Texas Hold'em, the card games,
yeah.
The pool games that you could jump online and play with people. There were also, I believe, dart games as well. Pinball games that you could sink your time into. I think that stuff still exists, like you mentioned, right? And there's still people, looking for those time killers. And that's why some of those super primitive games, super simple games on Steam, gain traction. And that's why a lot of people play them and whatnot. And the same thing on consoles is because, if you're a kid and you're in between homework or you're, waiting for your next sporting event and whatnot, or you have the day off and you're just trying to kill a little time before you head over a friend's house, you might want to play a game that you only want to spend 20 minutes on, right?
Yeah, you can put down
30 minutes on.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing for adults who have jobs and whatnot, or, have kids and whatnot, and they just don't have that much time. But yeah, when you mentioned that, it made me think of those old card games and Texas Hold'em, which was big in the mid 2000s, huge in the mid 2000s. We used to get a group together and play all the time, not online, but in person. But then also the pool games and whatnot. So my next game, Andrew, is another Monster Hunter game that a lot of our listeners may not have heard of. It's actually called Wild Hearts, and we sunk 160 hours into this game before we exhausted all the content. I believe we're 100% completionist on that game. But Wild Hearts is a 2023 action role-playing video game developed by Omega Force and published by Electronic Arts, Andrew, under its EA Originals label. The game tasks the player to hunt massive monsters in Azuma, a fantasy world inspired by feudal Japan. So one of the developers of this game, Koei Tecmo Games, hope I pronounced that right, Koei, they actually are also the developer of one of my favorite third-person fighting games, which I'm going to get into next. I'll actually mention that before I throw it back over to you. But the fighting in this game may be even better than the Monster Hunter series. The monsters are equally epic. The graphics are absolutely beautiful. The only reason why this game didn't go further in development, didn't get more added content, is because it didn't get favorable reviews because of optimization, Andrew. Optimization is so key. And overall, on the consoles and on the PC, the game was not optimized well. So people were losing frames. There was stuttering at random times. People on PC had crashes, all of that stuff. And it's such a bummer, because if you have a PC rig that can handle this, if you have one, if you know how to, change the settings for your graphics card and change the settings in the game to make this run smooth, this is one of the best fighting experiences that you can get in a video game, because Koei Tecmo does such a great job with those mechanics. So we more than got our money's worth. 160 hours. How Long to Beat site states that completionist is 133, with the main story 39 and a half hours. Just an awesome game. The next one that I want to mention before I throw it back over to you is Stranger of Paradise. When you think of Final, in the end of that title is Final Fantasy Origin. When you think of Final Fantasy games, I know what you think of, Andrew. The first thing is probably Final Fantasy VII, right? Or Final Fantasy VIII, which were so popular in the series. And what were those known for? Turn-based battling, right? And a really heavy story and whatnot. And those games are amazing single-player experiences. But what they did with this game is they made a Final Fantasy game that is third-person, with epic fighting, with the same lore as far as bringing the characters back, Tonberries, a lot of the characters that you love from the Final Fantasy series, but they made the game incredibly hard, incredibly deep, not too heavy on the story. And this game, the entire game, a Final Fantasy game, can be played online co-op. It is an awesome experience. We put 211.7 hours into this game, Andrew, and we still have not reached completionist. There's still a ton of stuff for us to do. So if you want a great fighting experience, third person, mostly with swords and whatnot, and you want those Final Fantasy characters that everybody knows and loves as far as enemies go, and you want to be able to experience this with another person and sink in a game that you can sink hundreds of hours into, this is a great one. I'll give you the quick overview. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin is an action role-playing game in the Final Fantasy series developed by Koei Tecmo's Team Ninja and published by Square Enix in celebration of the series' 35th anniversary, and it was released back in 2022. It's on PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Microsoft Windows, Xbox Series X, and Series S. Just loads of fun. We talked about that challenge, right? It's an incredibly challenging game. Just awesome stuff.
And you look at the amount of hours you're able to put in, and once again, that is important, that you are hooked like that. It's not just padding it out with extra nonsense. It is actually fun gameplay hour after hour. And of course, you and your brothers are spending hours playing basketball games as well, playing full games, 12-minute quarters, which does take a while. So the fact that you're also been able to be hooked on these other games and sink hours into that, which takes away time from the virtual hardwood, obviously, and playing it as you like to, yeah, it just speaks to how appealing the games are.
And guess what? Very positive reviews for that game on Steam. Why? Because you can't knock it. Like, how are you going to knock this game? Like same with those Remnant games and whatnot. Just the gameplay experience is epic. The game is super reactive on the sticks. The fighting is so good. The upgrades to your character, you can get immersed in that. There's just loads of content. It's challenging. Like, it hits. Right. So I love seeing that positive reception for a lot of these new titles, because people talk about how, there's no great online games out there. There's no great online co-op games. They don't make games challenging anymore. They're all easy. Well, I'm giving you a list of games that are not like that, right? That are relatively new. And, a lot of love was put into these games, into the mechanics of these games and the challenge of these games. And I just love to see it.
And it won't surprise anybody when I say that I like to revisit other games, other classics, and dust them off and replay them again, or if I haven't spent as much time with them. I mean, we all end up with a Steam library where we've picked up something on sale, Derek, and we haven't really played it, so time to give it a go. I picked up, a long time ago, Speedrunners, the side-scrolling racing game on Steam. And I got into it during a New Year's vacation with friends. A friend, Lenny, had taken care of the games for the video games for the event, and we were playing Speedrunners, and I really got into it, and got home and had to buy it myself. And that, of course, is the great thing about playing games in person, at a party, at a gathering, that somebody's got a game, and it was the same back in the day, when we were kids, Derek, growing up. You'd visit a friend and they'd have a really cool game, and you'd borrow it, or you'd have to end up getting it yourself, or renting it, or whatever, that it introduces you to these new games. And word of mouth and being able to try before you buy is so important. And it's why I love Shareware collections for PC back in the day, Derek. Being able to play this first episode of a game, this snippet of a game, and, yeah, just really enjoying it. And I remember playing the first episode of Jazz Jackrabbit on PC, the Shareware version, over and over again. So when it was released on Good Old Games, GOG.com, yeah, I snapped it up, snapped up the whole series, and it's been fun to actually play beyond that first episode. Another game that was actually gifted, shout out to Pat, shout out to P-Dub, is Stray, the game with the cat, Derek. And I know you love your cat. You can take control of this cat, and it's what they call a cozy game. They're calling them cozy games because they're not hugely action-oriented, although there are action sequences and checkpoints and so forth, but trying to navigate this post-apocalyptic world and solve the puzzle of how to progress through the game has just been stimulating, yes, but yeah, it definitely is cozy. Are you familiar with that one at all?
I have not, but I'll have to check it out because my cat is attached to me right now, and at all times I am his human. So navigating the world as a cat is kind of intriguing.
Well, you've got a meow button. I mean, how can you go wrong?
I also want to point something out. You mentioned kind of getting a snippet of a game and it kind of making you hungry for more. Do you remember the PlayStation demo discs?
Oh, yes.
For the original PlayStation?
Oh, I've got PS2 ones, actually. I tell a lie. PS2 ones, I remember, yeah.
I can't even tell you, Andrew, how much time we spent on one particular demo disc for the original PlayStation. It had games like Fighting Force, Intelligent Cube, Croc, Steel Rain, Parappa the Rapper, all of that stuff. And it gives you like an entire first level and sometimes a second level for those games. And for the instance of Parappa the Rapper, it was the original rap with Master Onion, right? Like you'd be able to do that, and then that's all they would give you. But there were probably 15 to 20 games on this PlayStation demo disc, and we sunk so much time into it. It was so much fun playing those short snippets of the games, and some of those we did end up picking up, later, right?
I miss demos, quite frankly.
I do. I miss demo discs, right? And if you actually go on YouTube, you can see that there's people out there that review the demo disc. It's funny. Or they say, let's take a look back on these demo discs, and you can see, what games were included and what they were showing people, all of that stuff, and how they were trying to grip people. But yeah, I definitely know where you're coming from with the whole snippet thing.
And not to make this too cynical, too negative, but it does show the shift in gaming, that they know that games will sell, or they're going for the big budget games that they're pretty confident are going to make money and sell, and of course recurrent revenue through microtransactions and DLC and so forth. But yeah, being able to get that try before you buy, and maybe that was to the detriment of some games, but you think of...
I was about to say, though, one of the reasons why we don't see as many demos today is because they want people to pick up the game on release day without experiencing it yet. Right. So I think that, like you said, to the detriment, I think a lot of the developers today are worried about how social media, how big it is today. Right. And somebody can go on there, and if, let's say, they play a demo, or they play a snippet of a game and whatnot before release, and they show that footage and they talk about how poorly a certain feature is or how poorly it plays, and then that can blow up and millions of people can see it and whatnot, and then boom, sales get hurt for the game. So I think that's more than likely why they're not there.
Oh, for sure. And it's a shame that it's become so... Well, of course, it's always been a business, but so oriented on maximizing sales and blockbuster games that, just like blockbuster movies, have kind of put an end to that mid-budget comedy film. You don't see as many of those because they made their money through DVD sales and word of mouth. And now the studios just want to have everything be an absolute cash cow franchise, which I get. That's capitalism, but from an artistic standpoint, from an audience enjoyment standpoint, it's certainly a shame. And the same with games, obviously, because Shareware back in the day was awesome. How many people played Commander Keen on PC, the Shareware version? Maybe they never played the full games. They certainly played the first game and the fourth game, which had Shareware releases and full releases. The fact that they could give away a game like that and offer and say, hey, register for the sequels, register for more content, and people did, and that they were successful, just goes to show the love and the quality of those games, even though technology was nowhere near what it is today as far as what they can do with games and so forth. But yeah, I do miss those. And we talk about the factors that keep us hooked on games. And again, there is overlap between basketball games and these other genres. Having that engaging experience on the sticks, feeling something, feeling joy when you're playing the game. We talk about story. There are criticisms of the story in Fallout 3 especially, and Fallout 4, and even New Vegas in parts, although it is generally better regarded than the Bethesda spearheaded releases, because Obsidian handled Fallout New Vegas, and that had some of the original Fallout developers and writers working on that game, which is why it's often preferred by some of the original Fallout fans. But story in games that have a story, obviously, so important. Getting immersed in it, because we have come to a point where video games are art. They are a great storytelling medium. And I recently talked about my new appreciation for my career stories. And although they can be intrusive at times, and they have kind of not totally spoiled the experience, but certainly maybe not had the positive impact that I would like, I've really come to appreciate them and what they're trying to do with them, the better stories in particular. And that is something that I love about other games as well, getting immersed in that story, being interested in the twists and turns. You look at a game like Spec Ops: The Line. I remember getting that one in, I think probably a Humble Bundle or something. I'd kind of heard of it, but I didn't seek it out, but happened to get it through a deal for a few bucks, and that, again, that's how we get these Steam libraries that have got all these barely played games in them. But Spec Ops: The Line, I won't spoil it, but it has a very heart-wrenching story and a very mature story and an ending that is quite powerful. And a lot of people can probably attest to that. And that is where games have come. They're not just these simple, mindless time wasters, although I can enjoy that as well. Once again, the free-to-play darts game that I'm playing is certainly a time killer, as well designed as it is for a mobile game, I will say. But games like Spec Ops: The Line, Fallout, these deep storylines, GTA as well, you get immersed in the story as much as the action. And also when there is an option to build different characters, that can go bit too far. I think the meta builds are way out of control in NBA 2K, for example. I think they're designing those so that you can pump money into them and create different builds and pump more money into them. So that is the problem with tying it into recurrent revenue mechanics. But when you have that choice to pick a different class or play a different way and change it up from time to time, yeah, these are the constant factors, the consistent factors that I really enjoy across games of all genres.
I will say this, though. Great storytelling is not new. The great story, and that's not what you were saying, but great storytelling was taking place on PlayStation with the Final Fantasy series,
Oh, sure.
Kingdom Hearts, the Parasite Eve, taking place on Super NES and whatnot, even with some NES games
Zelda.
and whatnot. So great, it's Zelda, right? So the great storytelling and deep storytelling and, the developers trying to connect you to the character, all of that stuff, and even build out stuff with your character with certain games, like the Final Fantasy games and whatnot. That's been going on for decades. I will say though that sometimes the story can be too heavy, and there's a lot of people that don't like a heavy story. And
Sure.
one of the drawbacks again to Monster Hunter Wilds is how heavy that story is. Right, there is way too much story and too little fighting and too little breathing room and whatnot. I think that some of these companies overdo it, right? And that's reflected in the negative reviews. A lot of the times it's like, I want to play this game. I don't want to watch cutscenes all the time, right? I don't want to be constantly interrupted while I'm trying to play this game. So I think that it's hit or miss when it comes to heavy stories, right? And heavy builds and whatnot. So really quick, I just want to go over a couple more titles and then I'll throw it back to you. Code Vein. My brother and I have spent 22.7 hours on this game, fully co-op. Code Vein is an action role-playing game developed by Bandai Namco Studios and published by Bandai Namco Entertainment. It was released worldwide on September 27, 2019 for PlayStation 4, Windows, and Xbox One, and sold over 3 million copies, but received mixed reviews from critics. On Steam, actually, the PC version, over 42,000 reviews, very positive. So people were loving the PC version of this game. But again, super challenging, third person, great combat, great art, unique art, great enemies, completionist on how long to beat is 62 hours, but main story 26 and a half. We're not even close to done. The main story. The Code Vein Steam description is: in the face of certain death, we rise, team up and embark on a journey to the ends of hell to unlock your past and escape your living nightmare in Code Vein.
Elden Ring, absolutely recommend this game for those of you who want a deep third-person RPG slash adventure slash action experience. A game that is you're going to be able to sink a lot of hours into something with great graphics, great gameplay, etc. Completionist on how long to beat for that one is 134 hours. The main story itself is 60 hours. My brother and I have put in 162.9 hours into that game on Steam, and that's and counting. That also has very strong PvP in it. So if you're into that sort of thing and want to take on other humans, you can do that, and the fighting is excellent for it. So Elden Ring, Andrew. I also recommend Hellpoint, which a lot of our listeners may not have heard of. It was actually released in July of 2020, and I'll read the description on Steam. Hellpoint is an intense action RPG taking place on Irid Novo, a derelict space station soaked in an intoxicating dark sci-fi atmosphere. Fight dreadful creatures, face the cosmic gods, and unravel their twisted story. Should the challenge be too great, play with a friend in local or online co-op. Beautiful thing on this game is it does have the local co-op option and the online co-op option. The game is deep. It has really solid mechanics and very interesting enemies. And the entire game can be played co-op, so you're noticing a theme here. And then Outward. This is another game that's an RPG that can be played local or online co-op. We have 237 hours into this game. The environments are absolutely beautiful. You're not bogged down by some slogging, boring story. You get right into the game, and most of it is pure gameplay without all the crazy cutscenes and whatnot. and it's another difficult game, just like Hellpoint, just like many of the games that I've mentioned. It's very challenging, but it is one hell of an adventure. So Outward is another game that I would recommend, and 88% of Google users liked this game. On Steam, it's overall a 7 out of 10. It is for PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and obviously PC. So, yeah, Andrew, the theme here is I love playing co-op with my brother. I love that shared experience. I love that shared experience with a challenge. I love games that, for the most part, it doesn't take 5 hours to beat or 2 hours to beat or 10 hours to beat. Something we can really sink our teeth into and maybe get 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 hours out of it. So, a lot of the games that I mentioned, follow that path. And if you like those sort of games, whether it be solo or co-op, those are the games we're playing right now and ones I definitely recommend.
Oh, great recommendations. Absolutely. And certainly there's a theme there which crosses over with your basketball gaming as well. And that's the way it is for me. I don't have any further recommendations at this point, probably because I am playing so many old favorites and dusting them off. And that is my motif, is sticking with a game or returning to a game that I enjoy. And it's great to find new games, whether it's a retro kick or a brand new release, obviously. But stick with what you want. Don't let other people dictate your gaming habits. If you don't enjoy a certain way of playing or a certain game, then by all means, listen to recommendations. I mean, that's what we've just been giving you on this show, obviously. But do follow your passions and follow your nostalgia and follow your interests. And don't be afraid to bring an old game back. And I know for some people that if the graphics are a bit outdated or if the game is a bit too old, or they've played it a bit too much, they can't play it, they have to put it aside, or just dust off for a very short period of time. That's fine. We're not all retro gamers, Derek. But for those of us who can go back, who can continue to enjoy games and play them in a new way, for these games that do allow you to do different playthroughs, choose different classes, choose different builds, etc., it's so much fun. So that is definitely a motif for me, a definitely recurring motif as far as my gaming habits, not just the virtual hardwood, but other genres as well. And I really enjoy it, so I'm not going to be shamed into putting those games aside and, you must play the latest game, whether it's a basketball game or otherwise. Play what you want. Enjoy what you want.
Yeah, I also want to point out that there's a few games that I didn't mention that my girlfriend and I are currently playing and that I would definitely recommend for an awesome co-op experience. And I know that you've heard of a couple of these and are probably fond of them. Cuphead. Cuphead is an excellent game. It gets overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, Andrew, out of over 163,000
that was a hit.
Reviewers. That tells you something, right? That game came out in 2017. Cuphead is a classic run-and-gun action game, heavily focused on boss battles, inspired by cartoons of the 1930s, and they nail it. The art is just unbelievable. The dialogue, it's an amazing experience. The visuals and audio are painstakingly created with the same techniques of the era: traditional hand-drawn cell animation, watercolor backgrounds, and original jazz recordings. Just love that game. Another one that can be really fun with a significant other is Missplosion Man. I have about 12.3 hours in on that on PC, but I also believe I put some time into it on the console. Just a lot of laughs, a lot of problem solving. It's an excellent game. So Missplosion Man. My girlfriend and I are super into Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 Grand Prix. 25.8 hours in on that. We've almost beat every difficulty level and every challenge and whatnot. We only have a couple more to do, but then we're going to move on to Nickelodeon Kart Racers 3. But if you like the Mario Kart style game, but maybe with more obstacles, right? With a little more zaniness, but with that awesome pace and whatnot, Nickelodeon Kart Racers really hits, and it's one of my favorite kart racing games of all time. And again, very positive ratings on Steam. Rayman Legends is a game my brother and I got into. You can play that game completely co-op, has an awesome zoomed out view for most of the action. You can have a lot of laughs with that one. Very positive again on Steam, 8,965 reviewers, very positive for all reviews. And Unravel and Unravel 2, 12.1 hours on Unravel. My girlfriend played that, and that was a solo experience. But Unravel 2 is a co-op experience, and we've been playing that, and we're 6.4 hours into that, and that game is an awesome, absolutely awesome side-scrolling puzzle platforming adventure game, and I recommend that one. And I also want to say that Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2, Andrew, we talk about first-person shooters. I still think those two games are two of the best of all time. Any PC really can handle those games now. You can still connect with people and play co-op. My brother and I still do it from time to time on those games. Super deep, a lot of content. It's fun upgrading your guns and whatnot. And you can still sink hundreds of hours into those games. So I will shut up now because we can definitely get to the community responses. But I could talk all day about non-basketball games as well, because we do sink a lot of hours into them.
And it is important, I think, to play other games. It gives you a perspective of gaming as a whole. You're not just focused on the one thing. I know some people just have their one thing, which, again, if that's what you enjoy, then who am I to say that you shouldn't? But with that being said, I do think it's a good thing to have varied tastes and be able to take enjoyment in a lot of things and not be so single-minded that you can only enjoy one single thing. Again, I'm not going to shame you if that is what you prefer ultimately, but I do think there is an advantage, even to basketball gaming. Again, having these perspectives of other games and game design and what makes an enjoyable game. There are some relatable themes across the board and design principles that are important to be aware of when we're giving feedback and evaluating games and so forth. So yeah, by all means, play other games. We love the virtual hardwood, but we love other games too.
Yeah. Also, she plays soccer and plays in like local leagues. She's in like 3 different ones right now. So we're playing a few soccer games as well. Super Soccer Blast on Steam and Galazzo's Soccer, the original one. Both of those games rock. Both of those games are a lot of fun. But Andrew, let's get to the community responses. So we did have a few on Twitter and a couple on Discord. And again, the great thing about this episode is there's going to be people bringing up games that maybe you haven't heard of before, or maybe something that you've thought about dabbling in. And maybe this episode will help you finally pick up that game and give it a shot or play it more. God of Sonder at God of Sonder states, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It's a wild game I've been enjoying the last few weeks. Historically accurate open world RPG set in 1403 Bohemia, a medieval simulator mixed with survival mechanics with some awesome swordplay combat. Great story as well. And in his opinion, it's a 9 out of 10. So that is some high praise.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one, but no, great recommendation.
Andrew at Andrew the X states, Fire Emblem Free Houses on Switch. Great turn-based strategy and can play on the go. He also states EAFC 25 on PS4. I'm playing exclusively Ultimate Team. It's easy to build up different squads without spending a single dollar. I'm building up women's squads and playing with eldest daughter against CPU. I didn't know you could do that on that game, and I think that's a nice touch. And I've never experienced Ultimate Team on anything other than NBA Live, but I know that they're incredibly popular on the soccer games and football.
Yeah, X would play some My Team back in the day as well. X, longtime member of the forum, longtime member of the community, and member of NLSC Thrillo, of course. Remember, he used to get his daughters to open up packs, actually, in My Team for good luck. That's really cool, and I do know that he's a fan of those modes, and yeah, football as well.
Garva at Garva is great states Red Dead Redemption 1. It's epic. Did you ever play those games? Because I feel like that might be up your alley.
I do actually have the first game on Xbox 360. Bought it some years back when it was on sale. I also have the second one on PC. I haven't spent as much time with them as I'd like, but again, Rockstar Games in that GTA style, obviously. So I do want to spend some more time with them. I guess I'm more of a fan of GTA, that motif, that setting. It's the same reason why I prefer Fallout to Elder Scrolls, even though there's obviously a lot of overlap there with it being a Bethesda release and using the same game engine to that point, but I kind of like that Fallout setting, that post-apocalyptic setting, as opposed to the medieval setting of Elder Scrolls. But I do have those games as well, Skyrim and Oblivion, so I do need to spend more time with them. As much as I do advocate for sticking with a favourite and going back to old favourites, it can sometimes prevent you from playing new games or games that you haven't played yet and have been sitting there in the collection collecting dust. So we'll give them more of a shot at some point, but no, I haven't spent enough time with them yet.
I have trouble playing games one player, by myself and whatnot. I will say that my brother Nick spent hundreds of hours on both Oblivion and Skyrim. And Skyrim is a fantastic game. And they actually had that mod that allowed you to play co-op, and my brother and I dabbled in it. And it was pretty neat. It was definitely a little bit buggy. Sometimes enemies would duplicate. Sometimes damage would hit by one of the users and whatnot. But the Skyrim Together mod is pretty ridiculous because that game was never meant to be two players. You'll like this one, Andrew. The next response is Limit Breaker. He states, GTA Vice City, replaying the old trilogy. The story is bat fun.
Yeah, I love all of those GTA games from that era. Like I said, 3 is my favorite of that trilogy, although my favorite is actually Liberty City Stories, which shares a setting with 3, obviously. Unfortunately, only released on PS2. I mean, obviously, I have no problem playing my PS2. It would be even more convenient if it was on PC, like the original trilogy. But yeah, I totally get it.
Moving over to Discord, Pep states, F1 Challenge, 99-02 with other season mods. It's still one of the best F1 games ever, and guys who made it are responsible for R Factor, which is still popular in sim racing. QB1120 says, I actually find myself playing a lot of local co-op games to play with my girlfriend. Outside of that, the only games I get on release these days are the Yakuza Like a Dragon series games. Ryu ga Gotaku, I hope I didn't butcher that, studio has been a trusted studio for fun games without needing to milk you for more money at every turn. Very ethical developers. You'll notice that too, Andrew, about my list. Those games are not predatory. Not one of the ones that I mentioned are predatory, and I love that about them. I asked him what co-op games he's playing with his girlfriend, and he states, we played popular ones like It Takes Two and A Way Out. We also played through Sackboy together. She likes side-scrolling beat-em-ups, so we just finished Castle Crashers the other day. We also play some less popular games. She loves all the Overcooked games, and I'll have to check some of those out to play with my girlfriend, Andrew, because, I've heard of a few of them, and they sound like fun.
And that is a recurring theme for us as well, to pick games that aren't predatory. I say that even though I do play NBA 2K, although not so much the more recent ones. Some games do have those mechanics, but at the same time still allow you to ignore them. That is the ideal scenario in this age of recurrent revenue mechanics, obviously, but there is a reason why I do like to retro game, and that is because I'm not dealing with it, because whatever's there, the mechanics are set up to not push you to spend, at least not in hindsight anyway, and with some of the older NBA 2Ks from the mid-2010s. But yeah, we don't like the predatory mechanics, we don't support them, we have been very critical of them in NBA 2K over the years, and they're sort of there in NBA Live as well, and EA Sports in other titles are certainly not above doing them, so we're not shilling for EA here, but yeah, we want that fun experience. This is why we play video games, basketball or otherwise, Derek, to have fun, not to pump more money into a game.
Exactly. Careless XCI states, Cyberpunk 2077. I must be on my 5th playthrough by now. I reached a point where I'm making up my own gameplay rules, like only looting stuff I can actually see. So no looting from containers, he states. Carrying only 3 weapons at a time, picking new perks at random, etc. Atmosphere and exploration is what keeps me invested. And what's funny is my brother and I do that sometimes with some of our favorites. Like I stated, NES Contra and whatnot. We'll create a challenge for ourselves within the game in order to experience the game again, but in a different way. So what we did with Contra is we didn't use the cheat, up, down, left, right, BA select start to get extra lives. We played through the whole game with just the default lives, and we weren't allowed to die. So we did a full playthrough where we weren't allowed to die, and I actually uploaded that video to YouTube as well, and we beat the game in 12 minutes. But we also were doing the same thing with Donkey Kong Country, Andrew, and I know that you would appreciate that. We were trying to play through Donkey Kong Country without dying, and that is not easy to do, and we have not accomplished that. But I love that he's making his own rules within the game in order to experience the game in different ways.
You also got the codes for Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 that remove the DK barrels in the midpoint barrels to make it an even tougher challenge, which is actually over 100% completion, just for fun there. And that's exactly what I'm doing with my Fallout 3 playout, my latest Fallout 3 playout, not using fast travel. And that is changing up the game because, I have to think about, I'm going to have a longer trip back. I need to have more healing items because I'm going to have more battles in the wasteland. I'm not going to be able to carry as much stuff back. I'm going to have a lot more opportunities to loot gear and so forth from the enemies that I encounter in the wasteland. But, I'm going to have to pick and choose and drop a few things that aren't going to get me as much caps when I get back to Megaton because I don't have enough carry weight to take everything back. And normally with the fast travel, I wouldn't be having those encounters, wouldn't be having quite as much loot on those trips. So, yeah, it definitely changes up the way you play, and that's fun.
The last response on Discord is from Thundershack. He states, finally bid on a Steam sale for Red Dead Redemption 2 a couple months back and logged a cool 150 plus hours. For some reason, I got hooked on that story more than GTA 5. What I like about that game, and most Rockstar games, is the seemingly endless amount of little details and Easter eggs that you could miss if you just rip through the story. The open world in that game is actually worth exploring and isn't an empty gimmick like many modern titles. Rockstar is rightfully criticized for milking their online modes for microtransactions, but what sets them apart is you still get your money's worth with the offline-based game. The developers clearly put heart and soul into the finer details, which takes me back to the golden era of titles that did not rely on online multiplayer. Again, kind of ironic considering Rockstar operates on both ends of the spectrum, and I think you would agree.
Oh, for sure. And I mentioned GTA 5 as a strong release, and it's not my favorite. Sometimes I feel the newer GTA games, GTA 4 and GTA 5, and it's funny that GTA 5 is the newer game when it was released in 2013. It just feels like it because of the re-releases, and I know GTA 6 is on the horizon, obviously, but sometimes the world feels a bit too big. Sometimes it feels a bit too much. Sometimes I like the simplicity of the older games, which is funny because a lot of people don't like the more primitive controls, and I do get their criticism of that. I do understand, but even playing the trilogy, the definitive edition of the trilogy, it does have some of those modern mechanics. You can choose the modern controls as well as the old school ones, and I just go for the old school ones because it feels right in those games.
So, Andrew, before we close, we did also receive a few responses on Facebook.
We did, and to the point of story being important, Ricky says, story and immersion. Do I want to spend time, for example, 100 plus hours, in this? I was very late to both The Witcher 3 and Red Dead 2, and just finished those two with 100 to 150 hours each, and currently playing, well, actually replaying, he says, GTA 4. Just like basketball games, most new story-driven games aren't as good as the ones mentioned, but having Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 waiting for me once GTA 4 is done. He goes on to say, I suspect a lot of players have a massive backlog just like me, so many new games, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 being the only new one bought in 3 years, feels unnecessary, and also only plays the older 2Ks as well, which I can certainly relate to these days. And yeah, for a lot of people, story is so important, but he mentions the backlog, and that certainly does happen when you have these Steam sales and you can get a bunch of games for $20, Humble Bundle, Fanatical, etc., that have these offers, these great deals. You end up picking up these games really cheap, and it's nice to have them there to play, but yeah, sometimes they do get shuffled out in favor of old favorites.
A couple things. One, The Witcher 3 is an amazing video game. I think I have about 30 to 40 hours into it, and you know how I'm not really a big fan of playing solo. That game is one player. That game is solo. And it is just so good from a story perspective, from a gameplay perspective, graphics, everything. Just that game rocks. As far as a backlog, you notice I mentioned a lot of games. We can't play those games every night, Andrew, right? There's not enough time, right? So, and we don't want a session on a game to only last 20 minutes. We want to be able to get into it and whatnot. So some of the games I mentioned are backlogged right now, like Outward. We haven't been able to play that in a bit because we're so into Monster Hunter Wilds, Monster Hunter World, and Remnant 2. And even Strangers of Paradise, which is one of my favorite video games of all time, and we still have content to get through. That game has been backlogged now for a couple weeks and whatnot. So I definitely understand that. There's definitely games that I bought on Steam sale, like BioShock, that series, and whatnot, that I've really wanted to install and actually play the games, but I haven't even installed the games yet.
Yeah, same.
I just got them when they were on sale. So, yeah, I have quite the backlog as well.
Steven says, Baldur's Gate 3, the storyline and similarity to a true D&D campaign keeps me coming back. Also going retro with Beneath the Steel Sky for PC. I love point-and-click adventures, but never tried this one when I was younger. And yeah, I've got that in my collection. It's actually available for free on Good Old Games, GOG.com, so anybody can just grab that one, the original game from 1994, and I need to spend some more time with it as well, being a point-and-click adventure fan back in the day also. But yeah, that one is actually available free to anyone and everyone on GOG.
And yeah, those games are incredibly well-reviewed, right? And the most recent Baldur's Gate, I believe, was heavily praised for taking the approach of having no microtransactions in their game and being fair to the gamer. And they hit record number of sales with that game. And the way I look at it is it was kind of a middle finger to the companies that aren't doing it the right way, the ones that are loading their games with microtransactions, the ones that are being predatory to consumers. And it's saying, hey, we can be profitable while being fair to the gamer, while not preying on consumers and whatnot. So another game, Andrew, that is just heavily praised for doing the right things.
For sure, and you love to see a company leading that charge and making that stand. Roger, one of the Live 01 legends, of course, says MVP Baseball 2005, arguably the best sim baseball game of all time. Pitching is fun, defense usually makes sense, and homers are super satisfying. NHL 2002, it's a tad more arcade-style hockey, fast-paced, lots of big hits, and the announcers are hilarious. And NCAA Football 14, although it has its flaws, the Infinity Motion is stellar. So yeah, I have heard of those being very popular among sports gamers over the years and holding up the same way many classic basketball games do. And I believe with MVP Baseball 2005, I think a few people in the modding community actually helped out with tools that were then used for the NBA Live series as well. And the NHL community also developed some tools that we were able to use back in the day. So that shows the advantage of all these games coming out on PC back then. They had the same file formats, so we were able to develop tools, and of course our tools also help them, and share those resources and be able to edit all the EA titles. So it was really cool.
MVP Baseball 2005 is in strong consideration for the best baseball video game of all time, at least based on the comments I see on, MVP Baseball 2005 videos, commentary related to posts that say, what is the greatest baseball video game of all time? MVP Baseball 2005 gets brought up consistently and often. I've watched their gameplay footage on their channel, and it does. It looks like a lot of fun. It looks like it has a lot of strong gameplay mechanics.
And speaking of the Diamond, Matt says MLB The Show. I know you've enjoyed that series.
Yeah, we got to get back into it. So my brother and I are 90 games into a season, both controlling our own team. So we played over 180 games of the season, 9 innings a game on the hardest level, all-time fantasy draft season. So we've sunk hundreds of hours into MLB The Show 20. And I think that's the best baseball video game I've ever played, MLB The Show 20 for PS4. And just the commentary is just so good. The graphics are unbelievable. The mods, and yes, you can mod on console, creating players and whatnot and making rosters. The mods for that game are the best I've ever seen in a baseball game. The stat tracking is amazing. Going through a season is so fun. The presentation overall just absolutely rocks. MLB The Show 20 just kicks major butt.
And I must admit that I'm not really into baseball, so it's kind of tough for me to get into those games, but everything I hear about them is very positive. Kind of makes me want to see similar features in a basketball game, just to throw it out there, what a competitor to NBA 2K could do. But yeah, definitely hear good things about that series.
You know what, another thing that's great about MLB The Show 20, and they took this away, you can't do this anymore on the newest shows. You can download music to a USB drive, and I think it's either .wave or MP3, and you can create your own soundtrack. You plug in the USB to your PS4, and the songs show up, and you select them for your soundtrack. And so we made a custom soundtrack of about 25 songs on MLB The Show 20, and you boot up the game and just your soundtrack is playing, right? That's modding on a console. How great is that? And another thing you can do is on the same USB stick, whether it be .wave or MP3 format, you can use whatever sounds or music you want for the batter coming up, right? Like the batter's walk-up music and whatnot, or what are the sounds it may, like if a home run is hit and stuff like that. Just the customization is ridiculous. They took that out, I believe, for the newest shows, which is disappointing. But yeah, MLB The Show 20 on PS4, it's like you're playing a PC game. You can do a lot of modding with it.
No, it's a really cool idea. Reminds me of GTA on PC, where you've got a folder where you can drop all your MP3 files and have that in-game radio station, a custom in-game radio station. I'm not sure if you can still do it with the Definitive Trilogy. I'll have to look into that, but you could do it with the older versions on PC. There's also at least one of the SmackDown vs. Raw games where you could copy an MP3 onto your Xbox 360 hard drive. I think it was an Xbox 360 exclusive feature that year, and use that MP3 as your wrestler's entrance music, your custom wrestler's entrance music. So yeah, very cool idea there. And finally, Sixth Man of the Year says Battle Realms, because I really love it for its unique blend of real-time strategy gameplay, Asian-like setting, and innovative mechanics. Also Downhill Domination and SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. That was a very strong release in the SmackDown vs. Raw series, kind of a controversial era in wrestling in general. As much as the Attitude Era was controversial, Ruthless Aggression also pretty controversial at times, but that was certainly a strong game. And yeah, another real-time strategy fan.
Very cool. Yeah, and I know that you've dabbled in a lot of different wrestling games. Like I stated before, my favorite wrestling video game of all time was WCW versus NWO World Tour for N64. I never really got into wrestling at all outside of that video game. It never interested me, but it is cool to see that you still follow it so closely and that you've been following it for decades.
So thank you to everybody who responded to Derek's prompts. Once again, Derek, great to have the community in on our discussion.
Yeah, thank you to our listeners, for always participating in the mailbag. You guys rock. I look forward to your responses every week.
With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, thank you for tuning in, and please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, NBA-Live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us. And of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep a look to the NLSC itself, NBA-Live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.